Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and welcome back to another faction preview for Total War Warhammer 3. As we are covering the final launch faction today, in Nakari, representing the Chaos faction of Selenesh. Of course, I know there's still the Ogre Kingdoms, which will come next week when their embargo drops, but they're technically not a launch faction, as they belong to a DLC. Now, representing Selenesh, Nakari will have three core mechanics. First is their unique faction resource called Devotee, which are followers of Selenesh that can be gained from raiding, sacking, and looting settlements, and a few other things we'll look at once we get into game. Not only that, we can use these devotees to summon disciple armies, and these are armies we can summon in corrupted areas to help us in battle. And finally, the core mechanic is seduction, and there's many different forms of seduction. On the surface, the simplest one is compelling enemy units to join you in battle, as you can pay a seduction cost before battle to convert a few of the enemy units to join your side. And if you build up enough seductive influence with certain factions that are prone to seduction, namely humans, elves, and beastmen, you can even force their entire faction into vassalage to you. And speaking of vassalage, maintaining vassals and using diplomatic means is actually a very core mechanic for Nakari, as we'll come here and take a look at his faction effects and lord effects. So, speaking of his faction effects, we have plus 20 points of diplomatic relations with all factions, and 50% increase to tributes from his vassals. So as you can see, this builds nicely into the seduction mechanic for Selenesh factions. On top of that, for Lord effect, which is Nakari's own army, he will gain 50% more experience the first time he fights with a new faction. Seduction cost for units will be reduced by 25%. There is a cost limit to how many units you can seduce before battle, and this can be increased through skill trees and tech. And finally, local region enemy units will lose 4 points of leadership. And if you combine the two effects, it kind of showcases that you have two ways to go about things. One is purely relying on diplomacy for those factions that can be tempted, and for those who resist, you can beat them down in battle first before using different things like Gift of Selenesh, which we'll look at once we get into game, to convince them after being punished to join your faction as a vassal if you wish, or you can just wipe them out. There's nothing keeping you from doing that. Now, taking a look at the map, we start out at the far northwestern corner of the map. It's a very favorable start. The only headache you have early on is that Skarbrand starts really close to you and you're surrounded by Khorne factions who just does not believe in diplomacy, so you do have to wipe them out. But once you break out of your early position and dealt with Skarbrand, the rest is pretty simple, as you have a very stable base and you can use the water routes to move on to more human preys that you can convert much more easily with your seduction. And we'll finally take a peek at the settings and obviously take a look at the units. So we'll be flying through these unit cards as always. For those who are interested to pause to look at unit stat cards before we do the unit roster overview, which will come later today as we'll review all 17 units of the Selenesh faction. And they're quite unique, as you will notice right away that we have infantry, cavalry and chariots, and monster and beast, but no range. And actually, Selenesh's faction has 0 range. Not even a single hybrid range weapon unit. Even the Soul Grinder is purely melee. Instead, Selenesh's roster relies on speed, flanking, and other debuffs like poison, and then also a special type that we'll hold off until we do our unit roster overview. So we'll keep that to ourselves for now, as we're going to jump in here, start the campaign, and take a look at why we want to save or kill Urson.
It was in the Palace of Ruin I found Nakari, the Keeper of Secrets. His den of excess was no place for mortals. With every step it whispered promises of all I desire. Like others before me, my soul yearned to be ensnared. But I knew if I succumbed here, he would own me for eternity. I made my revelations quickly, before my senses gave way. Yet Nakari found the tale of Be'lakor and Ursun tiresome. It was a secret he kept already. As my mind clouded, I made a final gambit. I would guide him through the maelstrom to the bear's deathbed.
The bear is tempting.
The sorrow of a dying god, yours to treasure.
A treasure to cherish. I want it. You will give it to me.
One drop of Ursun's blood. That is my fee.
Advise me well, and you will have your desire. Fail me, and I will have your soul.
Our task is to reap the sorrow of a dying god. Ursun's anguish, collected and treasured for eternity.
Lead me to the dying god, or it is your sorrow I shall savor.
At once, Arch-Tempter. It seems the great game continues, and Khorne makes his next move against your master, for he despises the Dark Prince most of all. Servants of the Blood God, surround your capital. You must act quickly. Regain the Shard lands from the Crimson Skulls. Their pain will give you meager sustenance, but it is a necessary step to reach riper fruits. Further south lies sweeter prey. Mortals who worship the ruinous powers. Inflict upon them pleasure or pain, as is your wont. Should you cross the Kraken Sea and reach Norska, you will find many mortals to tempt and usurp. However, there is a risk in extending far south, exposing your flank to the predations of Skarbrand, Khorne's mightiest bloodthirster. The Eternal Lagoon forms a barrier that will keep him at bay for now. But it is only a matter of time before your armies clash. There is much to do, Bejeweled One. You require a large fiefdom to sustain the divine hosts required to penetrate the realm of chaos. Let us commence.
Alrighty, love the wordplay, penetrate the realm of chaos. And we'll take a look at all these mechanics. So Selenesh actually, or Nakari's faction, does not have too many fancy mechanics, as you can see the limited icon here, as most of his mechanics built in with diplomacy, which can actually get quite complicated. So first off, we talked about the unique resource of devotees. There's many ways of gaining devotees, as you can see. You have designated buildings that can supply you with passive devotee gains. You can gain captives from fights, events from the campaign. Vassalized factions will provide devotees. Pleasurable Acts will provide devotees. Raiding enemy land, looting settlements, sacking settlements, creating cults, getting the gift of Selenesh, which is something we'll talk about very soon, and using your Unholy Manifestations, which is a core mechanic for all Chaos factions. And you can also spend them in events with factions you vassalized, and Pleasurable Acts. Use them for cult and for summoning armies, which is their core usage. As you can see, there's no button for it right now, but if we have enough and there's a suitable land where we can summon the army, then we can actually use the mechanic. You basically need it in a corrupted land, in a mortal realm. We're kind of stuck in the north of the Chaos Waste. We have Khorne faction all around us, and once we clear out our beginning province here, as you can see, these 3 land here, we have the option of bypassing this lagoon either from the north or from the south. Scarbrand's waiting for us on the other side. If we go south, obviously brings us into contact with mortal factions a little bit quicker, or we can just focus down the north, which will be easily defensible as we wipe out Scarbrand early on. So that's kind of a choice once you get to this lagoon right here. We won't be too worried about that. We're just here to discuss the faction and the mechanic, and we can talk about a couple of these. Pleasurable Acts. These are acts we can use in the province setting. Basically, there's different actions we can take. This is mainly in a controlled settlement where you can spend devotees to gain benefits for a number of turns. And then the really, really fun thing is Gifts of Selenesh. So if we have a lord or hero perform action on an enemy lord or hero, basically characters, it can be in the form of a battle, it can be in the form of a hero action. Regardless, as long as we come into contact with them and we, say, defeat them or successfully perform an action on them, we can impart the Gift of Selenesh on them. And what will happen is that they will start generating devotees for us, provide line of sight for us, and also have an effect on their faction, where the faction, if it's a mortal faction, you'll gain increased seduction, which we'll take a look at once we look into diplomacy. So diplomacy with seduction, there is that level as well as the level of pre-battle, which we'll take a look at when we do our battle. So let's hop into that diplomacy right away. Of course, if you're playing against the AI Selenesh faction and you get the Gift of Selenesh stuck on one of your characters, all you need to do is return the favor by defeating the Selenesh character or perform an action against their hero, and it'll get rid of it. So you just got to win the battle back to get rid of it, or you can wipe out the faction and it's gone. Let's take a look at diplomacy first. This is quite core to our faction. So there is this new category here called Seductive Influence, and this is going to affect the mortal factions. So it's not going to affect, ones that are other chaos factions. We can't really deal with them. They declare war on everyone. No use seducing them. So let's say we have these human factions. They're all south of the Kraken Sea here. Let's say we do a quick deal. And we perform a deal. Any deal. Doesn't matter the value, as long as it passes. And as soon as we do that, we go back, take a look at the Seductive Influence. You can see with this faction here, it's moved up. And as it closes the circle, you can use this to influence his faction to the point where he will end up becoming your vassal. And then you get more income from them, you get more devotees from them, and that's basically how your faction functions. And you can increase this by basically, as you can see, having diplomacy action with said faction. Even battling with your faction can increase the seduction. So it doesn't have to all come from diplomacy. You can still fight. And there's ways to resist this with racial resistance, depending on what race you're dealing this against. And there's also resistance depending on how much settlement they have. So basically, bigger factions are harder to seduce. Makes sense because you're trying to vassalize the entire faction. So if they're big, it'll take more work and so forth. So that's kind of the seduction on the macro level against factions. And before we jump into the other form of seduction where we do battle, we can talk about buildings real quick, because that can also generate devotion. So if we quickly hop into the building browser, it's a very standard building setup for most Chaos factions. The only really unique building setup for Chaos faction is Nurgle's with their cycles. But in this case, we end up with 2 forms of the capital. One of them's more of a bastion, focused on defense. Other one's more of a portal, focused on growth. And obviously you can get corruption from them, which will help us with increased control and increased income from all buildings as Selenesh. This is part of the great game, part of our Unholy Manifestation. We want to spread as much corruption as we can as we race the other Chaos gods. We have a very standard landmark building, the Court of the Covenant. I think 3 of the Chaos faction have it. And the setup for the rest looks very similar. And our income buildings are actually pretty interesting because it's based on control. So here we have a favored income chain of the infrastructure building. It provides a little bit of income, some growth, and improved, income from all buildings. So sort of a multiplier effect. And the cool thing is when your control is negative, you will lose more control, which sounds weird until you see this building here, dominance. So this building chain is your core income building chain. But if your control is below 50 points, you double your income from this building chain. So these two are very complementary in maintaining a low control to help you generate a lot of income, both from the flat value from the dominance, as well as the multiplier, and a small amount of flat level from the favored income. And this does go up quite a bit. So the thing is, you have 15 points of growth here at the highest level. If you maintain yourself pretty low here, you notice that the maximum negative control penalty is minus 20 growth. So if you somehow could hang on between 50 and negative 75, which is very possible because of the control, positive reversion here, when you're the negative +6, you can, shift yourself, as you can see, somewhere between negative 50 and negative 75 and just stop because your control negative is -6, your control is negative +6, and you hover here, the growth cancels out, you maintain a very, very high income for yourself. The other two building chain is a growth plus a casualty replenishment one, pretty standard. And then this one here is the opposite effect. It's what happens when you have a positive control settlement. You end up with increased control to maintain it because there's always a reversion back when you're very positive. And then on top of that, you get increased corruption and decreased costs of using proliferate cult. This is actually a very strong mechanic. I think it's from this. It costs 1,000 devotees. It's very good when you have multiple versions of that building because it's faction-wide -3%. So if you have, let's say, 33 provinces somehow, it's possible in the late game. You can do this for free. And what it will do is it will send out basically your followers, and you can establish cults up to 3 human or elf-owned settlements. So basically you gain cults. The other way of gaining cults passively is just having high corruption in those foreign territories. And once you have high enough, there's always a chance of spawning a cult. And then you can build basically sort of a sub-building existing in between, under their settlement. And it has various effects, including some which boost devotees. So those are things you can keep your eye out for. Last thing here, we have our Unholy Manifestation from our increased level of corruption globally, unlocking different possibility of rights. And if we do win the game, the great game, we'll gain better benefits on these. But here, our basic one, paying for pleasure, lasts 6 turns. All you do is you lash out your own units to take 6% damage. And then for the next 6 turns, you enjoy 6% campaign movement range, 6% speed, 6% weapon strength, and 6% charge bonus. And that's a pretty decent trade-off. So we can do it on our own army right here. And basically, we derive some bonuses from that pain. And 6%, you heal back really, really quickly. And then finally, we have our tech tree, which the number 6 is our special number for our Chaos faction. And there are 6 blocks of 6 tech, which is pretty straightforward. The first 3 blocks are available to you right off the bat. The line's pretty easy to understand. Basically, you just need all of them to get the final one, which is pretty intense, but they all cost 6 turns. And you can see even the final one costs 6 turns. So if you want this final tech, whatever the bonus is, pretty much always like a faction-wide big one, you have to get the 5 before. And for these 3 that are locked, they're building-based. And each of them are based on military building. You can easily find out which by just clicking on it. It's this one here, this one here, and this one here for the 3, in that order actually. So your more advanced building option, especially your hero options here, are the ones that will unlock it. And this one is your Keeper's Secret, your most expensive unit actually. You have exalted versions that can be lords, and of course Nakari is a very special legendary Lord Keeper secret. So these are the 3 building chains that unlock the final 3 sections of the tech tree. And I think with that, we pretty much covered all the basics of the faction, and we can go ahead with our first battle and showcase a little bit of seduction in battle. So here, as you can see, we have this seduction limit. So right now we can only pay up to 2,000 of our treasury to seduce a unit, and limit is only 1 unit. So each unit will have different costs, as you will see, and both of these numbers can be improved based on your main character's skill tree, which we will take a look at after this battle. Hopefully we level up. We'll borrow one of their bloodletters of corn. We seduce it. We spend 1,800. You don't have to do this because obviously that's quite pricey, but just to demonstrate how this will work, they will join you pre-battle, and you will basically deploy them as your own unit. Now let's fight this. And this will be more or less a time to showcase our units. Now, you know, none of them are ranged, but they're really, really fast. So we can't see it anymore because we're over half. Once we load in, we'll introduce some of the units. We're all about speed. Even our infantry are like as fast as other factions' cavalry, which is kind of nuts. We'll just start deployment. Our army ability basically is a damage dealing one, also causes rampage. Pretty good against units, and we have to points are generated for killing entities in units that have negative morale states. So you want to chase down kills, right? You're deriving pleasure from pain. So after they start running away, you keep chasing and you deal more damage. So this is our legendary lord, of course. We have a bunch of spells. We're not going to go over the details of the spells right here. The build options, we'll be having separate guides for all the lords and heroes in the future once we get around to that. We have Demonetta of Selenesh. As you can see, this is an infantry with 57 speed, which I believe is faster than the Jade Lancers for Grand Cafe. It's kind of crazy. They're just fast. Everyone is fast. And they're demon units. And they have a devastating flanker. So you're supposed to deal double your charge when you go from flanks. And that's kind of how you should combine your speed usage for some of these units. And then we have, oh, of course, the whips, the lash, deriving from pain. This is your standard infantry. They're kind of your frontline units, nothing special about them. Same as Marauders. These are just units with different weapons, right? You have the basic sword or claw and shield, whip and shield. We have a hail flare. So this is a chariot unit. Also very, very fast. 106 speed. As you can see, it looks very, very cool as well. And then we have Hell Striders, which just rides the unit right there. So they're sort of cavalry variants here. I believe they also have Soul Hunter, which you basically gain bonus damage, leadership, and charge bonus, or damage resistance actually, as you kill. So sort of a similar effect to what Khorne has, except for in this case, we're building up damage resistance, leadership, and charge bonus. I think we have Soul Scent. This is a little bit different. For each unit around them that is wavering in morale, enemies, you will basically build up to 25% armor-piercing weapon damage and 20 points of melee attack. So even though we're fast, most of the units, as you can tell by appearance, are not very heavy. So not a lot of mass on these units. So the point is get in there and sustain the fight. And we can sustain the fight with Saporic Musk on some of our attacks of units, which is a different type of poison if you want to think about it. We basically lower enemy melee attack and melee defense. And speaking of poison, I don't think any of our units... Oh, we do have one. We also have access of poison on a lot of our units, similar to Nurgle. Obviously not all our units, but basically we have 2 forms of debuffs, a lot of fast speed. We can throw his unit at him first, why not? And we'll just get started. We'll have obviously a much more detailed showcase once we do the unit roster. Yeah, we have like so many units with over 100 speed. And the microing is not that hard because like I said, even though you need to flank, none of your unit are ranged. You don't have to worry about that at all. And on top of that, you want to sustain them in fights. You don't actually need to cycle charge them that much, which makes things a lot easier. Alright, we're going to draw them out with their own units. And then we're going to build up 2 flanks. I could use a damage spell. We do have one. I'm pretty sure he's going to move before that. We'll see. Yep. Okay, hold on.
No one faster.
You think you guys can hide?
Power of Selenesh.
The little whip action going down. Not a lot of damage. Alright, now we will charge him up.
Whips. Strike.
There's no flanking if they don't face us somewhere.
Yes. Yes. Eternal hunters, driven by pain. Drinking pain.
Yeah, that charge bonus, early initial burst, and then once they start routing, obviously your units love killing those units, and you gain points for your army ability. We didn't even bring these guys in. We'll see if we can have them mop up a little bit. Oh, those are my bloodletters. Forgot about that. I want to get him. Reduces their defensive stats. And since we're so fast, we're really good at chasing down as well. We're so big. And only he's left. He should be just burning up slowly if we can get his morale to be low. Or else, I mean, he's going to fight to the end. Gotta turn off guard mode, or else they don't chase properly. Alright, he's about to kill himself. Betrayed by his own units. And that's it. Right, it's pretty straightforward in terms of seduction mechanic. Obviously, the price is an issue. We'll take a look at our Lord now. And you can always turn the captives into devotees. We'll pick up some money here. And the reward's very similar. You get your unique resource, you get a little bit of money, and you pick up one of your heroes. Then it will ask you to join, and also ask you to recruit 2 more units. Very, very standard operation. We did level up. So as you can see here, we start out with Elven Grudge. So we have more missile resistance and melee attack when fighting against elves. Nothing too crazy on the top row here. We're already huge, there's no mounts. We do have a quest at rank 10 for a sword, a Wit Stealer's Sword, increase post-battle loot by 10%, increase corruption in local province, reduce recruitment cost, increase our melee attack, enable draining attack, which I actually don't know what we're draining. It could be stamina, could be health. My bet is on stamina actually, probably causes fatigue. Weapon strength plus 10%, and we gain an extra ability which will basically allow us to double our attack power with a 120-second cooldown of 17-second duration. Pretty good buff, actually. And then back to the skills. We mainly want to focus on this role here. Also, Hate Khorne might be very useful early on because we're surrounded by a ton of Khorne factions. So Willing Prey, once we hit rank 10, we pick up a Hex, similar to what we have with the melee defense one we just used. This one's going to do something very similar at a very long range. Only 15 seconds though, 24 points of reducing melee attack and 40 points reducing melee defense. The melee defense reduction is absolutely huge, helps you wipe out unit quickly, and you want to target units, wipe them out, force them to rout. It'll help most of your unit out. both in terms of chasing kills for army abilities, as well as empowering certain ones with a soul scent trait to increase their attack. And then after that, we can improve our own speed, weapon strength, diplomacy, relationship boost with the human faction that's kind of pro-chaos, the Warriors of Chaos, Demons of Chaos. Well, that one's not human, but the Chaos factions, Beastmen and Norska. And we also will reduce Khorne corruption. Very useful early on because we're going to be taking over a lot of Khorne land. And then we can enable the sporadic musk attack on ourselves as well to reduce enemy melee attack and melee defense by 5 points each. It's not a big boost, but why not have it? And then we can have another Hex, reducing enemy melee defense as well. This is an effect range, and this is a passive ability that's activated whenever our leadership is higher than 50% of the base. So basically from the beginning, we will also rampage, which I think it's okay. You cause them to rampage, I think. It's not, so basically they stay and fight you, and they are lowering their melee defense around your legendary hero or legendary lord. It's pretty good. And then we have a passive ability for regen. This will heal us and also help us return vigor, so basically stamina boost, which is also very crucial because you do lose a lot of stats when you are fatigued. 30-meter range, and the cooldown is 21 seconds. 15 seconds. Duration is 21 seconds. And enable if enemy unit is destroyed within 30 meters. So basically, it's a passive one that activates whenever you wipe out an enemy unit. So the cooldown is short because basically it enables you enjoy 21 seconds of this, and then you need to have another enemy unit get destroyed within 30 meters of you to activate again. And it can't happen within 15 seconds of the last activation, essentially. But the total amount you can get from this is actually quite high, especially considering that if you're fighting other demon factions, like demon units, they will almost always burn away, right? So they will fully get destroyed. You don't have to chase them down. It will happen around you, and you can enjoy this heal and also regeneration of stamina. And then finally, Disciples of Excess. The disciple armies that we can summon increase by 20%. This might not seem like much right now, especially since you can only summon them in certain areas. That feels quite limiting, but wait till you see this. So we checked out the first one. The second one is you wait 2 turns, you cannot move, and you pick up 100 devotees and also reduce enemy territory growth. It has to be done in enemy territory, which is why this has the minus growth part. Basically, think of it as a 2-turn raid. And then if you move up, which requires you have more global Selenesh corruption, but if you do move up, the budget you get for recruiting units pre-battle is doubled, and you also pick up more corruption in local province. And finally, this is the cool one. Once you activate the Cult Uprising, then you pick an army to activate this on. For the next 5 turns, each turn, you will summon a new disciple army near your army, which just becomes kind of crazy if you compound that with what you saw at the end there. So basically you get big armies show up to help you fight for 5 turns for free at no cost of devotees for this. So it's quite nice. Basically you'll be like a hub to summon disciple armies. And I think that will do it. That's basically the entire mechanic for Nakari's faction. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this faction preview. And please remember to drop a like. And if you're interested in seeing the full roster breakdown for the Selenesh faction, definitely come back later today to check out the unit roster review. And I'll see you all then. Bye!